Welcome to the fifth module for the Global DARE Foundation Patient Collaborator Training Series. My name is Mousumi Bose, and I will be your narrator throughout these training modules to help you become an active patient collaborator in ongoing and upcoming research for adult refsum disease. In this module, we'll explore the essential components of clinical research and how patient collaborators, especially those in the rare disease community, play a vital role in advancing science and improving care. We'll begin by defining what clinical trials are and why they are critical to developing safe and effective treatments. Because most rare diseases lack FDA-approved therapies, participation in clinical trials offers hope for patients and families seeking new options. Next, we'll examine the human subject's protection in clinical trials, discussing the entities that are responsible for ensuring that all research involving human participants is ethical and safe. You'll learn about your rights as a research participant, including informed consent. We'll also discuss what patients should expect when engaging in a clinical trial, from recruitment to data collection and beyond. Finally, we'll connect these ideas through two real-world case studies to show how patient experiences contribute directly to research progress. By the end of this module, you'll understand the structure of clinical trials, the protections in place for research participants, and how your voice as a patient collaborator can make a lasting impact. So let's talk a little bit about clinical trials. Clinical trials are structured research studies where participants are assigned to one or more interventions, such as a medication, a therapy, or a medical device, to evaluate how these treatments affect health outcomes. Clinical trials are a vital part of medical research, ensuring that new treatments are both safe and effective, particularly in comparison to existing treatments before reaching the market. For people living with rare diseases, clinical trials are especially critical. Over 95% of rare diseases currently have no FDA-approved treatment, making research participation one of the few pathways towards discovering viable therapies. And clinical trials for rare diseases can also have broader scientific value beyond just within the rare disease community. In many cases, by studying rare conditions, researchers can gain insights that inform the understanding and treatment for more common diseases. Most well-designed clinical trials follow a series of structured steps to ensure that research is ethical, organized, and produces reliable results. It begins with study design and planning, where researchers develop the study protocol, determine the budget, and set up systems for collecting and managing data. Next comes regulatory compliance, which includes registering the study, obtaining approval from an institutional review board or an ethics committee, and making sure all staff are properly trained. Once the study is approved, the recruitment phase begins, identifying eligible participants and obtaining informed consent. During the clinical trial, data collection and monitoring take place through regular participant visits and careful documentation to track outcomes and safety. Finally, the study closes with reporting and analysis where results are shared and lessons learned are documented. And because rare diseases often have very small patient populations, patients and families are not just participants, but essential partners in the clinical trial process. That's why patient collaborators should be involved in every stage of the clinical trial process, helping to shape research that truly reflects the needs of their community. So earlier I mentioned clinical trial registration, and this is a crucial step in the clinical research process, especially within the rare disease community. So every study involving an investigational drug or biologic in the US must be registered on clinicaltrials.gov. This registration makes the research transparent and helps prevent bias by creating a public record of all studies, not just the successful ones. For patients and families affected by rare diseases, clinical trials registration through this mechanism is more than just a legal requirement. It is a powerful tool for finding potential trial opportunities and tracking progress in their condition. So, in general, to register a study on clinicaltrials.gov, researchers establish an account within the clinicaltrials.gov protocol registration system, and then they gather key documents such as the study protocol, the institutional review board or ethics committee approval, and the IND application to create a record in the clinicaltrials.gov system. Once the submission is reviewed and approved, the study receives an official National Clinical Trials identifier number, which then becomes publicly visible. So I mentioned the Institutional Review Board, or the IRB. At European research institutions, the IRB is more commonly known as the Ethics Committee. Both the IRB and the ethics committees are groups that review research involving human participants to ensure that it is conducted ethically and safely. And in rare disease studies, this protection is especially critical because patient populations are often small and deeply invested in finding treatments. So what the IRB or the EC does is review study protocols before any clinical trial begins. And in the US, all institutions conducting federally funded research, such as at hospitals, universities, or other independent research organizations, they must have an IRB registered with the Office of Human Research Protection, or the OHRP. So let's talk a little bit about the OHRP. So this is a federal agency within the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, um, and its primary mission is to ensure the rights, welfare, and safety of people who participate in research studies. The OHRP oversees and enforces what is known as the Common Rule, and this is the federal policy that governs how research involving human subjects must be conducted. Under this policy, every study that involves human participants must receive appropriate review and approval by an IRB. And this step helps confirm that research protocols minimize risk, respect participants' privacy, and obtain truly informed consent before participation begins. Because patients with rare conditions often have limited treatment options, they may choose to join research studies in the hope of advancing medical progress. The OHRP's oversight ensures that these participants are protected, that the studies remain transparent, and that the ethical standards for research are upheld. So, as I said before, the IRB, or ethics committees, they play a critical role in protecting people who participate in research studies, including those involving rare diseases. The main purpose is to ensure the safety, privacy, and well-being of participants while maintaining the highest ethical and scientific standards. For IRBs, each IRB is made up of at least 5 members, including a scientist, a non-scientist, and at least one person not affiliated with the institution where the IRB is housed. And this is to provide diverse perspectives and overall community representation. For research ethics committees in Europe, the committee makeup is not quite as dry as it is for the IRB, considering Europe is not just one country. But there are European Union level mandates around clinical trial ethical reviews that all EU countries are required to abide by. In the rare disease community, the IRB and the ethics committees are especially important because, as I said before, these studies often involve small, tightly knit patient communities and highly personal health data. So, policies surrounding confidentiality and privacy protection need to be upheld quite rigorously. When you're participating in a clinical trial, especially for a rare disease, where research opportunities may be limited, it's essential that every patient that participates understands what their rights are. You, as a research participant, have the right to safe, respectful, and considerate care, and to have your medical information and communications kept confidential. Researchers organizing clinical trials must provide clear and understandable explanations about your diagnosis, the study's purpose, and the treatments being tested. Before taking part in any procedure, you must give informed consent. And what informed consent means is that the research team will explain in detail what the procedure involves, potential risks and benefits, how long it may take, and what alternatives to the given treatments exist. You also have the right to refuse to participate or to withdraw from the study at any time without losing access to your usual medical care. If you do refuse, the team must tell you what the potential medical consequences may be. Finally, you may choose to designate additional doctors or organizations to receive your medical updates as you participate in this clinical trial. In terms of recruitment for clinical trials, finding enough eligible participants can be a challenge in rare disease clinical research. For these studies to succeed, awareness and outreach are key. Clinical trial opportunities are often shared through patient contact registries, through organizations like the advocacy organizations like Global Dare, and at medical centers that specialize in rare diseases. Increasingly, social media and rare disease networks also play an important role in connecting patients with research opportunities. Physicians are also another essential link. Physicians may identify eligible patients through medical history, ongoing treatment plans, or diagnostic test results. Once a patient expresses interest in a clinical trial, the study team then conducts screening to confirm eligibility. This may include reviewing medications, verifying the diagnosis, or completing a physical examination. For patients and families affected by rare diseases like adult refsum, participating in a clinical trial can represent hope for new treatment options and a chance to contribute to scientific progress. Now let's talk about informed consent, which is one of the most important steps before anyone joins a clinical trial. Informed consent ensures that every participant fully understands what the study means, including its purpose, goals, and expectations. For anyone participating in any clinical trial, participation must always be a voluntary decision. Before enrolling, the study team reviews the informed consent form with the participant. This document explains what participation entails, outlines possible risks and benefits, and details how the participant's privacy and rights will be protected. It helps patients and families weigh the potential value of the research against any discomfort or uncertainty. Informed consent is not a one-time signature. It is an ongoing conversation between researchers and participants. If a participant is found eligible for a study, data collection begins only after consent is given. If a participant is found ineligible for the study, then the study team must explain why. Thinking about joining a clinical trial, it's essential to ask the right questions so that you understand exactly what participation in this study means. Start by asking about the research itself. What's the purpose of this study? Who's funding it? And who approved it? It's also important to understand why you were selected and how the results will eventually be shared. Next, ask what participation would look like on a day-to-day basis. Find out what procedures, medications, or visits are involved, how long the trial will last, and whether or not the treatment is FDA approved for some other effect or it's truly novel and experimental. You should also ask whether you'll know which treatment group you're assigned to and how the trial might affect your daily life or current medical care. You'll also want to discuss the risks associated with these treatments. Make sure you understand both the known and the potential side effects of treatments and how risks are monitored. As you continue evaluating whether or not a specific clinical trial is right for you, it's also important to look beyond the study procedures and ask deeper questions about your rights and protections. First, consider privacy and confidentiality. Ask how your personal and medical information will be protected, who will have access to it, and how your data will be used throughout and after the study is over. It's also important to know what will happen if any of your information is accidentally disclosed. Next, explore the financial aspects of participation. Clarify whether or not there are any costs to you, including travel, procedures, or medications. Ask also who is responsible for covering medical care if you are harmed during the trial, and whether the study offers compensation or reimbursement for your time and expenses. Finally, reflect on additional considerations that may influence your decision. Will you personally benefit from participating? How much time do you have to make to make your choice in participation? Who can you contact if questions arise? And importantly, confirm that you can withdraw from the study at any time without affecting your ongoing medical care. So earlier I mentioned medication usage as part of the screening criteria for a clinical trial. But another aspect of clinical trials is really understanding not just medication usage, but also supplement use. This is a key part of ensuring both safety and scientific accuracy in clinical trials. Many participants in rare disease studies may already be taking, say, vitamins, minerals, or herbal products as part of their daily routine. However, these supplements can interact with investigational treatments or influence study results. For that reason, researchers carefully record and monitor all supplement use throughout the duration of a clinical trial. Participants are encouraged to disclose every supplement that they take, even over-the-counter or natural products, during screening and at each study visit. This information helps researchers identify potential interactions, control for confounding factors, and maintain the integrity of the clinical trial data. Depending on the study design, participants may be asked to stop using certain supplements or maintain their consistent intake for accurate comparisons. In some cases, certain supplement use may be an exclusion criteria in participating in a clinical trial. Now let's discuss several key terms that help us understand how clinical trials are structured to ensure fairness, scientific accuracy, and safety. First, randomization is the process of assigning participants to different treatment groups by chance rather than by choice. This helps eliminate bias and ensures that differences in outcomes can be confidently linked to the treatment being studied. Next, clinical trials may be single blind, meaning that the participant does not know which treatment that they are receiving while the researcher does, or they can be double blind, where neither the participant nor the research team knows who is receiving the active treatment versus the comparison treatment. Double blind designs are considered the gold standard because they help reduce both participant and researcher bias. Some clinical trials are placebo-controlled, meaning that a portion of participants receive a placebo, which is an inactive treatment that looks identical to the actual study treatment or medication. This helps researchers determine whether changes truly result from the treatment itself. A control group refers to participants who do not receive the experimental therapy and do receive the placebo. Some study designs that involve a placebo include the crossover study, where all participants receive each treatment, whether it be the treatment or the placebo, at different times, depending on the random assignment. And there are also parallel arm studies where participants stay in their assigned group and receive only one specific intervention, either the treatment or the placebo, throughout the course of the trial. For rare disease studies that require a placebo, which is the case in most phase 3 clinical trials, the majority of the time, those studies are designed as a crossover study to ensure that all participants receive the intervention or the treatment at some point in the study. So now that we've talked a little bit about study design, let's discuss a little about endpoints for clinical trials. A clinical trial endpoint is a specific, measurable outcome that researchers use to determine whether or not a treatment is having the effect that it's supposed to have. On this slide, we will walk through the three main types of clinical trial endpoints: primary, secondary, and exploratory. First, the primary endpoint is the most important outcome measure in the entire study. It's the one that determines whether or not the clinical trial meets the main objectives of that trial. In other words, if the primary endpoint improves in the treatment group, that's what shows that the therapy works. For adult refsum disease, a primary endpoint may be something like the improvement or the stabilization of visual function. Next are the secondary endpoints. These endpoints provide supportive information about the therapy's effect on the primary endpoint, or they capture additional meaningful changes in the condition. They help to understand the broader impact of the treatment in the clinical trial. Finally, exploratory endpoints are included to investigate new ideas or hypotheses. These aren't used to necessarily prove effectiveness of a treatment, but they can offer important insights and help guide future research. In adult refsum disease, this might involve measuring something like patient-reported quality of life. It's important to recognize that many clinical trials fail, not because a treatment has no benefit, but because the primary endpoint was not met. even when a secondary or exploratory measure or patient experience suggests improvement. This is why choosing the right endpoints is so crucial to demonstrating the true value of a therapy. So on that last slide, we talked about the different types of endpoints, the specific things a clinical trial measures to show whether or not a treatment is working. Endpoints can be clinical endpoints, surrogate endpoints, or patient-centered endpoints. And what we're looking at here are those data sources that feed into those endpoints. So this can include clinician-reported outcomes, patient-reported outcomes, or observer-reported outcomes. So, for example, for adult refsum disease, a clinical reported outcome or a clinician reported outcome might support a clinical endpoint such as a change in vision or in nerve function. For example, eye specialists may use ERG results or a Goldman visual field test to track how retinal function changes over time. Neurologists might measure issues surrounding balance. These types of measurements require medical expertise and often form the basis of your traditional clinical endpoints. Next are patient-reported outcomes, which directly support patient-centered endpoints. These are your own, as a patient, your own reports about how something like, say, adult refsum disease affects your daily life. You might be asked to rate your degree of night blindness, describe any changes in fatigue, or complete questionnaires about mobility, sensory symptoms, or emotional well-being. These outcomes help ensure that clinical trials measure what's really important to you as the patient beyond just the laboratory values. Finally, observer-reported outcomes often support both patient-centered and functional endpoints. These are observations that are made from someone that's close to the patient, like a parent or a caregiver or a partner, such as noticing, say, the amount of seizures that a patient may have in a day, or if and how much help is needed with certain tasks. Sometimes, depending on the situation, these observations can capture functional changes that others may recognize before you as a patient do. Together, these three types of outcome measures connect directly to the endpoints that we reviewed earlier. They help researchers build a complete picture of how something like adult refsum disease changes over time and how well a treatment is working clinically, biologically, and in daily life. And your involvement as a patient partner ensures that these endpoints that are chosen reflect the true priorities of the adult refsum community. One important piece to discuss regarding clinical trials is the potential for adverse events. An adverse event in a clinical trial is any unfavorable or unintended medical occurrence in a patient or participant who has received a study intervention, whether or not it is caused by the treatment that's being studied. Communication is essential when it comes to adverse events in a clinical trial. Before joining a study, the potential risks are explained during the informed consent process, but the monitoring does not stop there. Most trials include regular health check-ins so that the research team can identify any new symptoms or changes in your health. As a participant, one of the most important things that you can do is report any adverse effect right away, even if they seem small, even if they seem unrelated to the clinical trial or the treatment. Your feedback helps keep you safe and ensures that the clinical trial data is accurate. Every clinical trial also has a data safety monitoring team whose job it is to carefully track all side effects and determine whether any changes are needed. Depending on what they find, the team may adjust the study protocol, add extra health assessments or support for participants, or in some cases, recommend that certain individuals stop the clinical trial for safety reasons. So let's look at some real life examples that discuss the information that I've shared here in this module. So the first linked video to this module follows Juliet, who was diagnosed with a rare disease at age 3. And this video shows how participating in clinical trials transformed Juliet's life. At first, Juliet and her mother were unsure and fearful. Clinical trials felt unknown and the medicine was new. But through clear communication and trust built with the research team, they learned about their rights, safety monitoring, and the overall purpose of the clinical trial that Juliet participated in. This video highlights several key components of clinical trial participation that I've discussed here in this module. First, it discusses human subject protections. Juliet's family describes the study site as a safe, supported place with a research team that openly discusses risks, side effects, as well as expectations. Next, informed consent and ongoing communication. Juliet's mom emphasizes how the research team explains things clearly, answers all questions, and keeps them involved in every decision that's made. Next, study design and monitoring. Each visit includes physical exams, lab tests, and a careful review of Juliet's symptoms and well-being. Multiple specialists, nurses, and child life staff work together to make clinical trial participation safe and manageable. Next, outcome measures and endpoints. Juliet and her mother complete regular surveys about how she feels, which are, as I mentioned before, patient-reported outcomes, to track the treatment's impact on symptoms and quality of life. And daily life impact. The trial reduced hospital visits, allowed treatments at home, and gave Juliet more freedom to simply be a kid. The experience improved her health, stability, and her time with her family. Ultimately, this story shows how clinical trials can offer hope, better treatments, and the possibility of shaping future therapies. The second linked video is another example of how clinical trial participation can positively impact future health outcomes. The person in this video, Mark, participated in a clinical trial at the Mayo Clinic to study how the COVID-19 vaccine affects individuals with compromised immune systems, specifically those with Crohn's disease who are taking immunosuppressant medications. He donated blood to help researchers understand how the vaccine protects this particular vulnerable population. Mark emphasizes the importance of contributing to something larger than himself and sees participation in clinical trials as a way to support advancements in medical research, including potentially uncovering the causes of Crohn's disease. He encourages others to participate in clinical trials, noting that the process is in this particular clinical trial is non-invasive, and even a small contribution of time and blood can have a significant impact. For him, the collaboration between patients, doctors, and researchers creates benefits for everyone involved, and he values the opportunity to give back to an institution that has supported him throughout his journey with his disease. So there are many ways that patients can both participate in and become true partners within clinical trials. Participating in a study is important, but that partnership, it goes a step further by helping shape the research itself. There are several key resources that support patient involvement, including the Global DARE Patient Registry, bigger rare disease advocacy groups like NORD, Global Genes, or the United Leukodystrophy Foundation, and of course, clinicaltrials.gov, where a patient can search for ongoing or upcoming studies. Hospital centers of excellence excellence and research consortia also play important roles by connecting patients, clinicians, and investigators. Beyond participation, early patient engagement is essential. When patients contribute at the very beginning of the process, they help ensure that the research questions that are being asked and the trial designs and outcomes and recruitment strategies truly reflect patient needs and lived experiences. Patients can also help improve the clarity and relevance of consent materials, making the trial more accessible and understandable for others. As we wrap up this module, the key message to remember is that patients are absolutely essential to the progress of clinical trials, especially in the rare disease space. Because rare conditions affect smaller populations, every patient voice, every experience, and every contribution truly shapes the direction and the success of that research. Your engagement as a patient collaborator not only strengthens the scientific rigor of a clinical trial, but it also improves its relevance, its ethics, and its feasibility. When patients and collaborators participate early and stay involved throughout the process, clinical trials become more meaningful, more patient-centered, and ultimately more likely to lead to effective treatments. The most important takeaway is this: get informed, get involved, and take an active role in shaping the future of rare disease therapy. Whether you choose to participate in a clinical trial, contribute to a registry, or collaborate with researchers, whatever your involvement is, it has a real impact. Coming up next, we have a module that explores how patients and families can confidently participate in scientific discussions, helping to understand the language of research and engage more actively with clinicians and scientists. So I want to thank you for your time and request that you please complete the survey that's linked to this module. I look forward to continue guiding you through the upcoming modules. I'll see you then. For more information on this module or the series, please contact the Global DARE Foundation.